Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to a place where time moves slowly and every story is told with care. Tonight we travel far back, farther than almost any journey we could take, to a wide and quiet land where the very first cities of the world rose out of the mud. Imagine a flat plain baked by the sun, stretching so far in every direction that the edges seem to melt into the sky. Between two great rivers in soil that was once nothing but silt and reeds, people built the first towns, wrote the first words, and carved the first laws. Everything you know about cities, writing, schools, and even the way we count the hours began here, in a land most of the world has long forgotten. This is the story of ancient Mesopotamia, a name that simply means the land between the rivers. It is the story of how ordinary people, facing floods, heat, and hunger, slowly built something that had never existed before. It is a story of temples that touched the sky, of kings who dreamed of ruling the whole world, and of clay tablets small enough to hold in one hand that still speak to us across 5,000 years. This land gave us so much that we now take for granted, and yet its cities lie buried and silent beneath the sand today. To understand where we come from, we must go back to where it all began, to the soft banks of two rivers in a corner of the world that would change everything. But before we go any further, I want to take a moment. On this channel, we explore fascinating subjects in calm and careful detail. These journeys are made to help you relax, focus, or simply enjoy the flow of discovery. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Is it day or night where you are? What time is it? Are you tuning in while studying, working, commuting, or simply winding down? Drop your answer in the comments below. It is always wonderful to hear from you. And if you enjoy content like this, please support the channel by liking this video and subscribing. It helps us bring you more of these journeys. Now let us go back to the very beginning, to a time long before cities, when the land itself was still waiting for the first footsteps. The land we now call Mesopotamia sits in the middle of a wide and open plain, in the region that today we would call Iraq, along with parts of Syria and southeastern Turkey. Two rivers run through it, the Tigris in the east and the Euphrates in the west, and both of them begin far away in cold mountains and flow down toward a warm sea. Between these two rivers lies a stretch of flat ground so level that a person could walk for days and barely notice a single hill. The soil here is soft and pale, made from countless years of mud carried down by the water. In the far south, near where the rivers slow and spread out, the land turns into marshes thick with tall reeds, where the water is shallow and warm and full of fish. It is a strange kind of place, both harsh and generous at the same time, and it shaped everything that would happen there. In the beginning, before any towns or fields, this land was mostly empty and quiet. The summers were brutally hot, with a sun that seemed to press down on the earth and dry out everything it touched. There was very little rain in the south, sometimes almost none at all for months on end, and the ground would crack and harden under the heat. Yet the rivers kept flowing, fed by melting snow far away in the mountains, and where the water reached, life could grow. Small groups of people lived along the edges of the marshes and the riverbanks, catching fish, hunting birds, and gathering wild plants. They lived simple lives, moving with the seasons, and they had no idea that the land beneath their feet would one day hold the first great cities of humankind. To really understand this place, you have to imagine standing in it. Picture yourself on that flat plain at midday, with the heat rising in waves off the ground and the air smelling of dust and dry earth. There are no mountains to break the view, no forests, only the endless sky above and the shimmering line of the horizon all around. Then, far off, you see a thin band of green where the river runs, and the air there smells different, cooler and wetter, full of the scent of mud and reeds. Birds call out from the marshes, and fish move in the shallow water. This narrow strip of life squeezed between two rivers in the middle of a dry and open land was the whole world to the people who lived there, and it was enough to begin something no one had ever tried before. What made this land special was not that it was easy, because it was not easy at all. It was that it offered a rare combination of gifts to anyone patient and clever enough to use them. The rivers brought water in a place where rain was scarce. The floods, though dangerous, left behind fresh soil that was rich and good for growing crops. The marshes gave fish and reeds, and the reeds could be used to build homes, boats, and baskets. There were no stones and very few trees, so the people would have to learn to build from mud and clay instead. But the mud was everywhere, and it was free. Slowly, over many long years, people began to realize that if they could tame the water, they could grow more food than they ever thought possible. And more food would mean more people. And more people gathered in one place would mean something entirely new. The name Mesopotamia comes from an old language and simply means the land in the middle of rivers. And that name tells you almost everything you need to know about it. This was a land defined by water, by the two great rivers that gave it life and sometimes threatened to take that life away. Everything the people here built, everything they invented, and everything they became grew out of their relationship with those rivers. The story of Mesopotamia is really the story of people learning to live with water that would not obey them. Water that came too much some years and too little in others. It is a story of patience, of trial and error, and of ordinary people slowly figuring out how to survive and then how to thrive. And it all begins with the floods, with the wild and unpredictable pulse of the rivers themselves. The rivers of Mesopotamia were not gentle and steady like some rivers in the world. They were wild and hard to predict, and living beside them meant living with both a gift and a threat. Every year, snow melted in the far mountains where the rivers began, and that melting snow sent great surges of water rushing down toward the plain. The trouble was that this flood came in the spring, often at the wrong time for the crops, after the seeds had already sprouted and before the harvest was ready. So the very water that made the land fertile could also sweep away a whole year of work in a single day. And unlike some rivers that rise slowly and gently, the Tigris in particular could swell fast and violent, breaking its banks and drowning the fields under muddy water. Imagine what that must have felt like for the early people who lived there. You spend months planting and tending your crops, watching them grow green and tall, dreaming of the food they will bring. Then one morning you wake to the sound of rushing water, and you see the river climbing higher and higher, spilling out across the flat land with nothing to stop it. Within hours your fields are gone, buried under brown, churning water. Your home, if it stood too close, might be soaked or swept away. There was no wall high enough to always hold the river back, and there was no way to know for certain when the flood would come or how bad it would be. The people learned to fear the rivers even as they depended on them completely. Yet the floods also carried a hidden gift, one that took time to understand. When the water finally pulled back and drained away, it left behind a thin layer of fresh, dark mud spread across the land. This mud was full of the tiny bits of soil the river had carried down from the mountains, and it made the ground incredibly rich and good for growing. Farmers in many other parts of the world had to work hard to keep their soil fertile. But here, the river renewed the land almost every year, free of charge. The trick was learning to accept the flood, to work around it, and to capture the good soil it left behind while protecting the crops from being destroyed. This delicate balance became the great challenge of life in Mesopotamia, and meeting that challenge would push the people toward invention and cooperation. The two rivers each had their own character, and the people came to know them well. The Euphrates was the calmer of the two, flowing more slowly and rising more gently, which made it easier to live beside and to draw water from. Most of the earlier cities grew up along its banks or along the channels that branched off from it. The Tigris was faster and fiercer, cutting deeper into the land and rising more suddenly, which made it harder to control. Between and around these rivers ran countless smaller streams and channels, some natural and some that people would later dig themselves. Over the centuries, the rivers even changed their paths, wandering across the flat plain and leaving old cities stranded far from the water that had once fed them. To live here was to live with a landscape that was always shifting, never quite the same from one generation to the next. Because the rivers were so powerful and so unpredictable, no single family could hope to control them alone. If you wanted to protect your fields from flooding or bring water to dry ground, you needed the help of your neighbors, and they needed yours. Digging channels, building banks of earth to hold back the water, and clearing away silt were huge tasks that required many hands working together. This simple fact, that survival depended on cooperation, quietly shaped everything about how people lived here. And so, the relationship between the land and its people became a kind of long conversation, spoken through the seasons. The people watched the sky and the water, learning the signs of the coming floods and the patterns of the dry months. They marked the passing of time by the rise and fall of the rivers, and they built their whole way of life around it. Slowly, they moved from simply surviving beside the water to actively working with it, from fearing the flood to using it. This shift, small and gradual as it was, marked the true beginning of civilization in Mesopotamia. For once, people learned to guide the water where they wanted it to go. They unlocked a power that would change the world. That power was irrigation, and it began with something as humble as a ditch dug into the soft earth. The first real step toward the great cities of Mesopotamia was so simple that it might seem hardly worth mentioning. It was the ditch. Long ago, some farmer standing at the edge of a river must have noticed that if he scraped a small channel in the dirt, the water would follow it and run into his dry field. It was a small idea, but it changed everything, because it meant that people no longer had to wait for the river to come to them. They could bring the river to their crops instead. They could reach out to dry land that the flood never touched and make it green and full of grain. This simple act of guiding water through a dug channel is called irrigation, and it was the quiet engine that powered the birth of civilization. At first, these channels were small and short, dug by a single family or a small group to water their own patch of land. But as people saw how well it worked, they dug more of them and longer ones, reaching farther out from the riverbank. They learned to build low walls of packed earth to hold water in place, creating small ponds that could be opened to flood a field when needed. They learned to time their digging and their planting around the rise and fall of the rivers. Bit by bit, the flat and dusty plain that had once supported only scattered fishing villages began to fill with fields of grain. Where before there had been dry, cracked earth, now there were wide stretches of barley and wheat swaying in the hot wind. The land was being transformed by human hands, one ditch at a time. This new way of farming brought a change so important that it is hard to overstate. For the first time, people could grow far more food than they needed to survive from day to day. There was a surplus, which simply means extra, more grain than any one family could eat. And that extra food changed the shape of human life completely. When people no longer had to spend all their time searching for food, some of them could do other things instead. One person could become a potter, shaping bowls and jars from clay. Another could become a weaver, or a builder, or a maker of tools. The extra grain fed these workers, and in return, they made goods that everyone could use. This is how the first specialized crafts and trades were born, all resting on the foundation of surplus grain. More food also meant more people, and more people meant larger settlements. The small villages that had once held only a few families began to grow into towns, and the towns kept growing. People gathered together because there was safety in numbers, and because a large group could dig bigger channels, build stronger walls, and grow even more food. Living close together brought new challenges too, of course, because when many people share the same water and the same land, they need ways to settle arguments and share the work fairly. But the pull toward gathering was strong, and it kept drawing people in from the countryside. The stage was being set for something the world had never seen before, a place where thousands of people lived side by side in one settlement. The work of irrigation also created a need for organization on a scale that had never existed. Someone had to decide where the channels would go and who would dig them. Someone had to make sure the water was shared fairly, so that the farmers at the far end of a channel did not go dry while those near the river took it all. Someone had to organize the clearing of silt, which built up in the channels every year and had to be dug out or the water would stop flowing. These tasks required planning, agreement, and leadership, and they slowly gave rise to people whose job was to manage and direct rather than to farm. Often, these leaders were connected to the temple, the sacred place at the heart of each settlement, and this gave the temple a central role in daily life that went far beyond religion. The seeds of government and of the first cities were being planted in the mud. By this time, the land looked very different from the empty plain of long before. Green fields spread out along the rivers and channels, dotted with clusters of small mud brick houses. Paths ran between the fields, and boats made of bundled reeds glided along the waterways carrying grain and goods. In the center of the larger settlements, a special building rose above the rest, the home of the local god and the heart of the community. People worked the fields, tended their animals, shaped pots, and wove cloth, and they did it all together in a way that no group of humans had ever done before. The stage was set, the pieces were in place, and the world was ready for its first true city to rise from the marshes. That city, one of the oldest in all the world, was called Eridu. Eridu sat in the far south of the land, near the edge of the marshes where the fresh water of the rivers met the salty edges of the sea. To the people who lived there, Eridu was not just old, it was believed to be the very first city, the place where kingship and civilization had come down from the gods. Whether that was true or not, Eridu was indeed one of the earliest settlements to grow large enough and organized enough to be called a city. It began as a small village built on a slight rise of dry ground amid the wet marshland, and over many generations it grew, layer upon layer, as each new group built on top of the homes of those who came before. If you could have walked through Eridu in its early days, you would have found a maze of small houses made of mud brick, packed close together along narrow, winding lanes. The houses of Eridu were built from the only material the land offered in plenty, which was mud. People mixed the soft river mud with straw and shaped it into bricks, then left them to bake hard in the fierce sun. With these bricks they built walls, and with reeds and mud they made flat roofs to keep out the sun and the rare rain. The homes were simple, usually just a few small rooms around an open courtyard, but they were cool inside during the heat of the day. The floors were packed earth, sometimes covered with reed mats, and the air inside smelled of clay, smoke from cooking fires, and the food being prepared. Outside, the lanes were dusty and full of the sounds of daily life. The voices of neighbors, the barking of dogs, the tap of a potter shaping a jar, and the distant calls of birds from the marshes. At the very heart of Eridu stood something that set it apart from a simple village. It was the temple, the house of the god who was believed to own the city and everyone in it. The god of Eridu was Enki, a god closely tied to fresh water and wisdom, which made perfect sense in a place that lived and died by the water. The temple began small, just a single room built on a low platform. But over the centuries, it was rebuilt again and again, each time larger and grander than before. Each new temple was built directly on top of the old one, so that over time, the platform grew taller and taller, lifting the sacred building high above the flat plain. This rising platform was the ancestor of the great step towers that would later become famous across Mesopotamia. The temple was the center of everything, the place where the community gathered, gave offerings, and looked for meaning. The temple was far more than a place of worship. It was also the economic center of the city, a kind of great household that gathered in grain, animals, and goods, stored them, and shared them out. The people believed the god owned the fields and the harvest, so they brought portions of what they grew to the temple as offerings. The temple, in turn, kept records, supported workers, and helped organize the huge task of maintaining the irrigation channels. In this way, religion and daily survival were woven tightly together, because serving the god also meant keeping the whole community fed and functioning. The priests who ran the temple held real power, not only over the spirit, but over the grain that kept everyone alive. This blending of the sacred and the practical was a defining feature of Mesopotamian life from the very start. Life in Eridu followed the slow, steady rhythm of the seasons and the rivers. In the growing months, the fields were full of people bending over the barley and the wheat, tending the channels and watching the water. When the harvest came, the grain was gathered, threshed, and carried into the storehouses, and there was a feeling of relief and plenty in the air. Fishermen went out into the marshes in their reed boats, returning with their catch as the sun set behind the endless reeds. In the cool of the evening, families gathered in their courtyards to eat, to talk, and to rest. Children played in the dusty lanes, and the smell of baking bread drifted through the air. It was a simple life, hard in many ways, but it was a life lived together, in one place, generation after generation. What makes Eridu so important is not that it was the biggest or the grandest city, because it was neither. It is that it shows us the very beginning of city life itself, the first time humans gathered in large numbers and built a lasting settlement around a shared center. Eridu was proof that people could live together in the thousands, could organize themselves, could build something that lasted longer than any single person. It was a small light at the start of a very long story, a first attempt at something that would grow far beyond what its people could have imagined. From this humble city of mud and reeds, the idea of the city spread across the land, and soon a far greater city would rise to the north, one so large and so busy that it would truly change the world. that city was Uruk. If Eridu was the first small flame of city life, then Uruk was the great fire that lit up the whole land. Uruk rose along the Euphrates, and in its time it grew into the largest city the world had ever seen, home to perhaps 40 or 50,000 people packed together within its walls. To understand how astonishing that was, you have to remember that never before in human history had so many people lived in one place. For all the long ages before, humans had lived in small bands, villages and towns. But Uruk was something entirely different. It was a true city in every sense, crowded, loud and alive, a place where a person could walk all day and still not see every corner of it. Standing in Uruk at its height, you would have felt the sheer weight of humanity gathered in one spot for the very first time. Picture the great walls of Uruk rising out of the flat plain, thick walls of mud brick that stretched for miles around the city. These walls were said to have been built by the legendary King Gilgamesh, and they were a source of enormous pride, a sign of the city's strength and glory. Inside the walls lay a dense sea of houses, temples, workshops and storehouses, separated by narrow lanes that twisted and turned in every direction. The air was thick with the smells of the city, cooking smoke, animal dung, fresh bread, tanning leather, and the ever-present dust. The sounds never stopped. The murmur of thousands of voices, the braying of donkeys, the clatter of workshops, and the calls of traders selling their goods. It was a place of constant motion, a hive of human activity unlike anything that had existed before. At the center of Uruk stood not one, but two great temple districts, sacred precincts dedicated to the gods who watched over the city. The most important god of Uruk was Inanna, a powerful goddess linked to love, war, and the morning and evening star. Her temple complex was a marvel of the age, with grand buildings raised on high platforms and decorated with thousands of colored clay cones pressed into the walls to form beautiful patterns. These decorations shimmered in the sunlight and must have been a stunning sight for anyone approaching the sacred grounds. The temples were the pride of the city and the anchor of its life, the places where the great festivals were held and where the wealth of the community was gathered and managed. Around these sacred centers, the whole city pulsed with energy and purpose. The people of Uruk did an incredible range of work, far more varied than anything possible in a small village. There were farmers, of course, who worked the fields beyond the walls, but there were also full-time craftspeople of every kind. There were potters who no longer shaped each pot by hand, but used a spinning wheel to make them faster and more evenly, a clever invention that came into wide use here. There were metal workers who worked copper into tools and ornaments, weavers who made cloth in great quantities, and builders who raised the temples and walls. There were traders who traveled far to bring in the things the land itself lacked, such as timber, stone, and precious metals, exchanging them for the grain and cloth that Uruk produced. This web of workers and traders made Uruk a center of wealth and skill that drew people and goods from far and wide. But living so close together in such huge numbers brought problems that no one had faced before. When tens of thousands of people share the same streets, the same water, and the same food supply, disagreements are certain to arise. Who owns which field? Who owes what to whom? How is the grain to be shared? And who gets to decide? Crimes had to be dealt with, disputes had to be settled, and the whole complicated machine of the city had to be kept running smoothly. This created a growing need for leaders, for rules, and above all for records, for some way to keep track of the endless flow of goods, debts, and promises. The human memory alone could not hold it all, especially in a place as busy and complex as Uruk. The city was straining against the limits of what could be managed by memory and word of mouth. And it was here, in the crowded temples and storehouses of Uruk, driven by the sheer complexity of life in the world's first great city, that one of the most important inventions in all of human history took shape. The people of Uruk needed a way to record who owned what, who had paid and who had not, how much grain had come in, and how much had gone out. They needed a memory that would not fade, a record that could be checked and trusted. Out of this simple, practical need came something that would change everything, not just for Mesopotamia, but for the entire future of humankind. It was writing, the marks that became words, the invention that lifted human thought out of the fleeting present and fixed it forever in clay. To understand how it began, we have to look at something very small and very humble, a handful of little clay shapes. Long before anyone wrote a single word, the people of Mesopotamia had a problem to solve, and it was a problem about counting. When a farmer brought grain to the temple, or when one person owed another a certain number of sheep, they needed a way to keep track of it. So they came up with a clever tool. They made small tokens out of clay, little shapes that each stood for a certain thing or amount. A small cone might stand for a small measure of grain, a sphere for a larger one, and other shapes for animals like sheep or goats. To record that someone had given 10 measures of grain, you would simply keep 10 of the right tokens together. It was a simple system, but it worked, and people used it for a very long time before anything better came along. To keep these tokens safe and to make sure no one changed the count, the people came up with another clever idea. They began sealing the tokens inside a hollow ball of clay, a kind of clay envelope. Once the tokens were sealed inside, no one could add or remove any without breaking the ball open, so the count was protected. But this created a new problem, because if you wanted to check how many tokens were inside, you had to break the ball, and then it was ruined. So someone thought of pressing the tokens into the soft outer surface of the ball before sealing it, leaving marks that showed what was inside. Now you could read the count from the outside without breaking anything. And this small step led to a huge realization that would change the course of history. The realization was this: if the marks on the outside told you what was inside, then perhaps you did not need the tokens inside at all. Why not just make the marks? So people began pressing marks directly onto flat pieces of clay, using them to stand for the things and amounts they wanted to record. At first, these marks were simple pictures, tiny drawings of the things themselves. A mark shaped like a head of grain meant grain. A mark shaped like an ox head meant an ox. This was the first true writing, and it was born not from poetry or storytelling, but from the humble need to count grain and cattle. It is a beautiful truth about human history that the greatest tool of the mind began as a tool of the storehouse. Writing was invented so that people would not lose track of their sheep. Over time, these picture marks changed and grew more powerful. Drawing detailed little pictures in wet clay was slow and clumsy, because the clay would clump and tear if you tried to draw curved lines. So the scribes found an easier way. Instead of drawing pictures, they pressed the end of a cut reed into the clay, making small wedge-shaped marks. By combining these wedges in different arrangements, they could form all the signs they needed, and they could do it quickly and cleanly. This wedge writing is called cuneiform, a word that simply means wedge-shaped. Slowly, the old pictures faded away, replaced by patterns of wedges that no longer looked like the things they stood for. Writing had become a system of symbols, abstract and flexible, capable of far more than counting. And this is where the true power of writing revealed itself. Once the marks no longer had to look like pictures of things, they could be used to stand for sounds instead of objects. This was a giant leap. If a sign could stand for a sound, then signs could be combined to spell out any word at all, even words for things that could not be drawn, like ideas, names, and feelings. Writing could now capture speech itself, the actual words a person spoke. It could record not just how many sheep someone owned, but the story of a king, the words of a prayer, the terms of a law, or the lines of a poem. What had begun as a way to count grain had grown into a way to hold human thought itself, to freeze it in clay and pass it down through the ages. The world would never be the same. The importance of this cannot be measured. Before writing, all human knowledge lived only in memory and passed from person to person by spoken word, and when a person died, whatever only they knew died with them. Writing changed that forever. Now knowledge could be stored outside the human mind, kept safe, copied, and shared across great distances and long stretches of time. A merchant in one city could send a written message to a partner in another. A king could send orders across his lands. Laws could be written down so that everyone knew them. Stories could be recorded and read by people who lived long after the storyteller was gone. The invention of writing in Mesopotamia is one of the great turning points in the whole story of humankind, and it happened right here, in the clay of these river cities. And with writing came a new and powerful kind of person, the scribe. The people who mastered the art of writing were called scribes, and in the world of ancient Mesopotamia, they held a special and respected place. Writing was not easy to learn, because cuneiform used hundreds of different signs, far more than the small handful of letters we use today. Learning them all took years of hard study and constant practice. Because of this, only a small number of people ever learned to read and write, and those who did became valuable and important. A scribe could find work in the temple, in the palace, or in the households of wealthy merchants, keeping records, writing letters, and managing accounts. To be a scribe was to hold a kind of power, because in a world run on written records, the person who could read and write held the keys to knowledge and to memory itself. The tools of the scribe were simple, but the skill to use them was rare. A scribe worked with a lump of soft, wet clay, which he would shape into a flat tablet that fit comfortably in the hand. His writing tool was a stylus, usually made from a cut reed, with an end shape to press clean wedge marks into the clay. Working quickly before the clay could dry, the scribe pressed row after row of tiny wedges into the surface, forming the signs that made up words and numbers. When the tablet was full and the writing complete, it could be left to dry hard in the sun, or if the record was very important, it could be baked in a fire to make it last almost forever. Some of these baked tablets have survived for more than 4,000 years, and we can still read them today, which is a wonder in itself. To become a scribe, a young person had to attend a special school, a place the Mesopotamians called the tablet house. These schools were strict and demanding, and the students spent long days copying signs over and over until their hands knew the shapes by heart. They began with simple lists of signs and words, then moved on to longer texts, copying out laws, stories, and hymns to fix the language in their minds. Teachers were harsh, and we know from old tablets that students who made mistakes or misbehaved could be beaten for it. It was a hard road, and many years of effort separated a beginner from a master. But those who made it through gained a skill that could lift them out of the fields and into a life of respect and comfort. For many families, sending a son to the tablet house was a path to a better future. The work of the scribes touched every part of Mesopotamian life. They recorded the grain that came into the temple and the goods that went out. They wrote down the sales of land, the loans between neighbors, and the marriage agreements between families. They kept the accounts of the great estates and the records of the kings. They wrote letters that traveled between cities, carrying news, orders, and the words of one person to another far away. Without the scribes, the complex world of the Mesopotamian city could not have functioned at all, for it was their careful records that held the whole system together. They were the memory of their civilization, the ones who caught the endless flow of daily life and pinned it down in clay so that it would not be lost. Over time, the scribes did far more than keep dry records of grain and goods. As writing grew more powerful and more flexible, the scribes began to use it to preserve the deeper things of their culture. They wrote down the great stories that had been told aloud for generations, the tales of gods and heroes and the beginning of the world. They recorded prayers and hymns to the gods, capturing the words of worship in lasting form. They copied out lists of kings, medical remedies, mathematical problems, and observations of the stars in the night sky. In doing so, the scribes turned writing from a tool of the storehouse into a keeper of an entire civilization's knowledge and imagination. The clay tablets they left behind are our windows into their world, letting us hear the voices of people who lived thousands of years ago. Because of the scribes and their patient work, we know far more about ancient Mesopotamia than we could ever know from ruins alone. The stones and mud brick can tell us how people built and where they lived, but the tablets tell us what they thought, what they believed, and what they cared about. We can read the complaints of a merchant cheated in a deal, the worries of a mother writing to her son, the boasts of a proud king, and the fears of people facing flood and famine. Through the marks pressed into clay by long dead hands, these ancient people speak to us still, across an unimaginable gulf of time. And nowhere does this ancient voice speak more powerfully than in the writings that touch the gods. For religion stood at the very center of everything the Mesopotamians did. To understand them, we must climb the great temples and enter their world of faith. To the people of Mesopotamia, the world was alive with gods, and those gods were everywhere and in everything. There was a god of the sky and a god of the air, a god of the sun and a goddess of the moon, gods of the rivers, the storms, the grain, and the wild places. The Mesopotamians believed that these gods were powerful and often unpredictable, capable of great kindness but also of terrible anger. A good harvest, a gentle flood, a healthy child. These were signs of the gods' favor. A drought, a plague, a destroying flood. These were signs of their displeasure. In such a world, keeping the gods happy was the most important work anyone could do, because human life depended entirely on their goodwill. Religion was not a small part of life set aside for certain days. It was the very foundation on which everything else rested. Each city had its own special god or goddess who was believed to own and protect it. The god of a city was thought to live right there, inside the great temple, dwelling among the people almost like a mighty ruler in a grand palace. The people believed that they had been created by the gods for a single purpose, which was to serve them, to feed them, to house them, and to do the work the gods did not wish to do themselves. This belief shaped everything. The temple was not just a place of prayer, but the actual home of the god, and the priests who served there were like the god's personal household, caring for the divine presence day and night. They fed the statue of the god with offerings of food and drink, clothed it, and honored it with music and prayer. In their minds, they were keeping the whole world in balance. The greatest and most striking sign of this deep faith was the ziggurat, the towering temple that rose in stepped levels toward the heavens. A ziggurat was a massive structure built of countless mud bricks, shaped like a series of great platforms stacked one on top of another, each smaller than the one below. It looked something like a giant staircase reaching up into the sky, and at the very top sat a shrine, the highest and most sacred spot, closest to the realm of the gods. These enormous towers dominated the flat landscape, visible from far across the plain, a constant reminder of the city's god and the people's devotion. Building one took vast amounts of labor and material, and it stood as the proud heart of the city, a bridge between the earthly world below and the divine world above. To stand at the foot of a ziggurat and look up was to feel small before the power of the gods. The rituals that took place in and around these temples filled the calendar and gave shape to the year. There were daily offerings when the priest brought food and drink to the god as though serving a great and honored guest. There were grand festivals that drew the whole city together, times of feasting, music, and celebration in honor of the gods. One of the most important was the great festival of the New Year, a time when the people believed the fate of the coming year was decided by the gods. During these festivals, statues of the gods might be carried through the streets in solemn processions, and the whole community would join in the rites. These ceremonies bound the people together, reminded them of their shared beliefs, and reassured them that the proper care was being taken to keep the gods content and the world in order. The priests who ran the temples were among the most powerful people in the city. They were not only religious leaders, but also managers of enormous wealth, for the temples owned vast lands and stores of grain, animals, and goods. The priests organized the work of the fields, the collection of offerings, and the sharing out of food, and they employed many workers to carry out these tasks. Because the god was believed to own so much, the temple was in many ways the economic engine of the city, and those who controlled it held great influence over everyone's lives. In the earliest days, the chief priest may have been the most important figure in the whole community, the link between the people and their god, and the one who guided the great tasks of survival. Faith and power were tightly bound together at the very top of society. This deep religious world explains so much about how the Mesopotamians lived and thought. They watched the sky closely, believing the movements of the sun, moon, and stars held messages from the gods, and this careful watching would one day grow into real astronomy. They tried to read signs in all sorts of things, from the flight of birds to the shapes of the liver in a sacrificed animal, always seeking to know the will of the gods and what the future might hold. They lived with a constant awareness of powers greater than themselves, powers that had to be respected and served. This shaped a people who were both practical and deeply spiritual, who built ditches and temples with equal seriousness. But faith alone could not settle every question, and as cities grew and pressed against one another, a new force rose to share power with the priests. That force was the king, and with kings came ambition, rivalry, and war. As the cities of Mesopotamia grew larger and richer, they began to bump up against one another, and the trouble that came from this was almost impossible to avoid. Each city needed water for its fields, and since the rivers and channels were shared, one city taking too much could leave another dry. Each city wanted good land, and the borders between them were not always clear. When two neighboring cities both claimed the same stretch of fertile ground or the same source of water, disagreements could turn bitter, and bitter disagreements could turn into fighting. In the earliest days, the priests had led the cities, but priests were not always the best leaders in times of conflict. When war came, The people needed someone who could command an army, make quick decisions, and lead them into battle. And so a new kind of leader rose to power, the king. At first, the king may have been a temporary war leader, chosen to lead the city through a time of danger and then to step aside once the danger had passed. But over time, as conflicts grew more frequent, these war leaders held onto their power and became permanent rulers. The king took his place beside the priests at the top of society, and slowly, he became the most powerful figure of all. He led the army, he settled disputes, he oversaw the building of walls and channels, and he claimed to rule with the blessing of the city's god. The king lived in a grand palace, separate from the temple, and around him gathered soldiers, officials, and servants. This was the birth of kingship, one of the oldest forms of government in the world, and it would shape the region for thousands of years to come. The wars between the cities could be fierce, and the writings and monuments that survive show us glimpses of these ancient conflicts. Armies marched out from the cities, made up of ordinary men called from their fields, armed with spears and shields and led by their king. Some fought in tight formations, standing shoulder to shoulder behind a wall of shields, while others rode in early wagons pulled by donkeys. The goal was often to seize land, water, or wealth, or to force a rival city to submit and pay tribute. Victory brought glory to the king and his god, and the winners often carved images and words to celebrate their triumph. One famous monument shows a king leading his soldiers over the bodies of the defeated, with vultures circling above, a stark reminder of how bloody these struggles could be. War had become a regular part of life in the land between the rivers. The cities rose and fell in their fortunes, each one enjoying periods of strength and suffering periods of weakness. There was no single ruler over the whole land, but rather a scattering of independent city-states, each with its own king, its own god, and its own ambitions. Among the most important were cities like Ur, Lagash, Kish, and Uruk, names that appear again and again in the old records. Sometimes one city grew strong enough to dominate its neighbors for a time, forcing them to obey and pay tribute. But such power rarely lasted, for a strong city today might be conquered tomorrow, and the balance was always shifting. The kings competed not only in war, but in glory, each trying to outdo the others in the size of his temples, the strength of his walls, and the fame of his name. It was a restless, competitive world, always in motion. We know the names of some of these early kings because they were proud to record their deeds, and because later scribes kept long lists of the rulers who had come before. One famous record, known as the King List, names ruler after ruler, city after city, stretching back into a legendary past where kings were said to have reigned for thousands of years. These impossibly long reigns tell us that the earliest part of the list mixes history with myth. But as it goes on, it comes closer to real events and real people. Through such records, and through the monuments the kings left behind, we can piece together the shifting story of these rival cities, their alliances and betrayals, their rises and falls. It is a story of ambition and pride, of leaders reaching for greatness in a hard and dangerous world. One king among all the rest became so famous that his story outlived his city, his kingdom, and even his civilization. He was remembered not only as a ruler, but as a hero, a figure larger than life whose deeds were told and retold for centuries. His name was Gilgamesh, and he was said to have been the king of Uruk in its early days, the very king who built its mighty walls. Over time, the stories about him grew and joined together into a great tale, one of the oldest stories in all of human history. This tale was written down by the scribes and copied again and again across the ages. And though it was lost for thousands of years, it was found again in modern times and can be read once more today. To understand the heart of the Mesopotamian world, we must sit with the story of Gilgamesh, the oldest story ever told. The story of Gilgamesh comes down to us as a long poem, an epic, which means a grand tale of a great hero and his deeds. In the story, Gilgamesh is the king of Uruk, but he is no ordinary man. He is described as being part god and part human, incredibly strong and handsome, but also proud and harsh. At the start of the tale, Gilgamesh rules his city with a heavy hand, working his people hard and giving them no rest, so that they cry out to the gods for relief. In answer to their cries, the gods decide to create a match for Gilgamesh, someone strong enough to stand against him and turn his energy away from troubling his people. This is a story that begins, as so many great stories do, with a ruler who has too much power and not enough wisdom. The gods create a wild man named Enkidu, who lives out among the animals in the wilderness, running with the herds and drinking at the watering holes. Enkidu is as strong as Gilgamesh, but he is untamed, knowing nothing of cities or civilized life. In time, Enkidu is brought into the human world and led to Uruk, where he and Gilgamesh meet and immediately test their strength against each other in a mighty wrestling match. Neither can defeat the other, and instead of becoming enemies, they become the closest of friends. This friendship is the heart of the story, and it changes Gilgamesh, softening his pride and giving his life a new purpose. Together, the two friends set out on great adventures, seeking fame and glory, ready to face dangers that no ordinary man would dare to challenge. Their adventures take them far from the safety of the city. They journey to a distant cedar forest to fight a fearsome monster who guards it, a giant named Humbaba, and after a hard struggle, they defeat him. They return home as heroes, but their triumph angers the gods. When the goddess Inanna offers to marry Gilgamesh and he refuses her, she sends a great bull from the heavens to destroy the city, and the two friends kill it. But such defiance of the gods cannot go unpunished. The gods decide that one of the friends must pay with his life, and they choose Enkidu. Slowly, Enkidu falls ill, and despite all of Gilgamesh's grief and pleading, his beloved friend wastes away and dies. The loss shatters Gilgamesh, who had never truly faced death before, and it sends him spiraling into sorrow and fear. The death of Enkidu changes the whole meaning of the story. Faced with the loss of his friend, Gilgamesh is struck with a terrible new understanding, that he, too, will one day die, that death comes for everyone, even the strong and the mighty. This fear consumes him, and he sets out on a desperate journey to escape death and find the secret of everlasting life. He travels to the ends of the earth, crossing mountains and dark passages and a sea of death, searching for a man who is said to have survived a great flood and been granted eternal life by the gods. It is a journey born of grief and terror, the journey of a man who cannot accept that his time will end. In this part of the story, Gilgamesh stops being a proud king and becomes something much more human, a person facing the deepest fear we all share. At the end of his long search, Gilgamesh learns a hard and lasting truth. He finds the man who survived the flood, and he even finds a plant that is said to restore youth, but he loses the plant to a snake before he can use it. In the end, he cannot escape death, for no human can. He must return home to Uruk empty-handed, at least in one sense. But as he approaches his city and sees its great walls rising against the sky, he comes to understand something wiser. He cannot live forever in his own body, but the city he built, the walls he raised, the good he can do, these things will outlast him. The way to touch something lasting is not to flee death, but to build something worthy that will remain after we are gone. It is a message of quiet acceptance and hard-won wisdom. The reason the story of Gilgamesh still moves us today, thousands of years after it was written, is that it speaks to feelings we all know. It is about friendship and love, about loss and grief, about the fear of death, and the search for meaning in a life that must end. These are not ancient concerns belonging only to a lost world. They are the same questions that people wrestle with in every age, including our own. When we read the story of Gilgamesh weeping for his friend Enkidu, we recognize our own sorrow at losing those we love. Through this oldest of stories, the people of Mesopotamia reach across the vast gulf of time and touch us directly, showing us that though so much has changed, the human heart has stayed much the same. And while Gilgamesh lived in an age of separate cities, the day was coming when one man would unite them all under a single crown. For a long time, the land between the rivers had been a patchwork of separate cities, each ruled by its own king, each proud and independent. No one had ever managed to bring them all together under a single rule, and perhaps no one had even dreamed it possible. But then came a man whose ambition was as vast as the plain itself, a man who would do what no one had done before and forge the world's first great empire. His name was Sargon, and he ruled from a city called Akkad, in the north of the land. The story of his rise is remarkable, for he was not born a prince or a king. According to the tales told about him, he began life in the humblest of circumstances and rose through his own strength and cunning to become the master of the whole land. The stories say that Sargon was born in secret and set adrift on the river as a baby in a basket sealed with tar, much like other famous tales of infants saved from the water. He was found and raised by a humble gardener, and he grew up far from the halls of power. In time, he came to serve at the court of the king of Kish, rising to a position of trust and influence. Then, through some turn of events lost to history, he seized power for himself and set out on a path of conquest unlike anything the land had seen. Whatever the truth behind the legend, what is certain is that Sargon was a brilliant and ruthless leader, a man of enormous drive who refused to be limited by the borders of a single city. He looked out over the many rival cities and saw not chaos, but opportunity. Sargon built a powerful army and led it from victory to victory, conquering the proud cities of the south one after another. He defeated their kings, tore down their walls, and brought them under his rule, until all the land of Sumer bowed to him. But he did not stop there. He pushed outward in every direction, leading his armies far beyond the plain, into the mountains and toward distant lands and seas. He boasted that his empire stretched from the lower sea to the upper sea, meaning from one end of the known world to the other. Never before had one ruler controlled so much territory or so many different peoples. Sargon had created something entirely new in human history, an empire, a single state binding together many cities and lands under one crown. It was a stunning achievement that would echo through the ages. Holding such a vast empire together was a challenge as great as conquering it. Sargon could not simply leave each conquered city to govern itself, for then it would soon slip away from his control. Instead, he worked to bind his empire together in lasting ways. He placed his own trusted men as governors over the conquered cities, so that his will reached into every corner of his lands. He is said to have spread the use of a common language for official business, helping to tie the different peoples together. He improved the roads and the flow of trade, allowing goods to move across his empire more freely than ever before. He even placed his own daughter in a high religious position in an important city, joining together the power of his throne and the power of the temple. In these ways, Sargon tried to turn his conquests into a lasting order. Under Sargon and the kings who followed him, the empire of Akkad flourished for a time, and its influence spread far and wide. Trade brought in goods from distant places, wealth flowed into the cities, and the arts reached new heights. This was an age of confidence and grandeur, when the rulers of Akkad saw themselves as the greatest power in the world. Sargon's very name became a legend, remembered and honored for centuries after his death, and later kings looked back on him as a model of greatness to be imitated. His grandson, Naram-Sin, ruled with even greater pride, going so far as to declare himself a living god, a bold claim that showed just how high the kings of Akkad had risen in their own eyes. For a while, it must have seemed that this empire would endure forever. But empires, like the floods of the rivers, rise and then recede, and no power lasts forever. The empire that Sargon built was the first of its kind, a bold experiment in ruling many lands as one, and like many first attempts, it carried weaknesses within it. Holding so many different cities and peoples together by force was a constant strain, and beneath the surface, resentment and unrest simmered among the conquered. The very size that made the empire great also made it hard to defend and hard to hold. And there were forces beyond human control, changes in the climate and the land, that would press hard against the empire in the years to come. The story of Akkad would not end in lasting glory, but in decline and collapse, teaching a lesson that would repeat again and again through history. Even the mightiest of empires can fall. The empire of Akkad had risen with astonishing speed, spreading across the land in a single lifetime. But it could not hold together forever. From the very beginning, the conquered cities had never fully accepted their loss of freedom. They remembered their days of independence, and they resented being ruled by kings from Akkad, who took their wealth and commanded their obedience. Beneath the surface of the great empire, rebellion was always waiting, and whenever the central power showed any sign of weakness, cities would rise up and try to break away. The kings of Akkad spent much of their strength putting down these revolts, marching their armies back and forth to crush one uprising after another. Holding an empire together, they learned, was far harder than winning it in the first place. The empire also faced enemies from beyond its borders, peoples who lived in the mountains and on the edges of the settled land. Among these were fierce mountain people who raided into the plain, taking advantage of any weakness to strike at the wealthy cities. As the power of Akkad slowly faded, these raids grew bolder and more frequent, adding to the empire's troubles. An empire under attack from outside and torn by rebellion from within is an empire in serious danger, and Akkad was now facing both at once. The strength that Sargon had built up was being worn away year by year, drained by constant fighting on many fronts. The great structure he had raised was beginning to crack and crumble under pressures too great for any ruler to withstand. But perhaps the deepest blow came not from any human enemy, but from the land and sky themselves. There is strong evidence that a long and terrible drought struck the region during this time, a stretch of years when the rains failed and the land grew dry and barren. For a civilization that depended entirely on water for its crops, a drought was a disaster of the worst kind. Fields withered, harvests failed, and hunger spread across the land. People abandoned the drying countryside and crowded into the cities that still had water, straining the food supplies past their limits. When people cannot feed themselves, no army and no king can hold a state together, for the whole foundation of the society begins to give way. The drought struck at the very roots of the empire's strength. Under all these pressures combined, the empire of Akkad finally fell apart. The central power collapsed, the conquered cities broke free, and the mountain raiders swept in to fill the void. The great city of Akkad itself, once the proud capital of the world's first empire, fell into ruin and was so thoroughly destroyed and forgotten that even today no one knows exactly where it stood. It is a strange and haunting thought that a city that once ruled a vast empire could vanish so completely that its location is lost. The age of Akkad ended in confusion and disorder, a time that later writers remembered as dark and troubled, when the old order had broken down and no strong hand ruled the land. The first great experiment in empire had run its course and failed. Yet even in its fall, the empire of Akkad left a lasting mark on all that came after. It had shown that many cities and peoples could be bound together under a single rule. And though this particular empire had crumbled, the idea did not die with it. Future kings would remember Sargon and dream of building empires of their own, following the path he had first walked. The tools of empire he had developed, the governors, the roads, the common language, the joining of throne and temple, these would be used again and again by those who came after. And the story of Akkad's rise and fall became a lesson carved into the memory of the land, a reminder of both the heights that ambition could reach and the depths to which pride could fall. The collapse was not the end of civilization, only the end of one chapter. Out of the disorder that followed the fall of Akkad, the land slowly found its footing again. The mountain raiders who had swept in were eventually driven out, and the cities of the south began to recover their strength and their pride. In time, one city rose above the rest and gathered the land under its rule once more, bringing order back to the region after the long years of trouble. This was the ancient city of which now entered its greatest age of glory. Under a new line of powerful kings, would build an empire of its own and usher in a golden age of prosperity, learning, and grand building. The rebirth of showed that civilization in the land between the rivers was resilient, able to rise again even after a great fall. The kings who led this revival of were determined and capable rulers who set about restoring order and greatness to the land. They united the southern cities under their authority and reached out to control a wide territory, rebuilding the power that had been lost when Akkad fell. But these kings are remembered not so much for conquest as for the way they organized and governed their realm. They built a highly ordered state, run by armies of officials and scribes who kept careful track of everything that happened within it. The amount of record-keeping from this age is staggering, with tens of thousands of clay tablets recording the flow of grain, animals, cloth, and labor across the kingdom. It was a civilization obsessed with order, counting, and control, a well-oiled machine of government unlike anything seen before. The greatest king of this age was a ruler named Shulgi, who reigned for a very long time and left a deep mark on his kingdom. Under his rule, the state reached its peak of organization and strength. He reformed the way the kingdom was run, standardizing weights and measures so that trade and taxation could be handled fairly and consistently across all his lands. He built roads and set up resting places along them, making travel and communication faster. He supported the scribal schools and the arts, and he even had hymns of praise composed about himself. boasting of his wisdom, his strength, and his skill in running and in music. Shulgi saw himself as the ideal king, a shepherd caring for his people, and under his careful hand the kingdom flourished. He also took the bold step, like the kings of Akkad before him, of declaring himself a god. The most famous monument of this golden age was the great ziggurat that the kings of built to honor the moon god, the special protector of their city. This enormous step tower rose high above the flat plain, built of millions of mud bricks, its lower levels faced with harder baked bricks to protect them from the weather. Broad staircases climbed up its sides to the shrine at the top, where the priests carried out their sacred duties closest to the heavens. The ziggurat of was one of the largest and finest ever built, a towering symbol of the city's wealth and devotion. Its ruins still stand today, thousands of years later, one of the best preserved of all the great temples of Mesopotamia, giving us a real sense of the scale and ambition of this remarkable age. To stand before it even now is to feel the power of that lost golden time. This golden age of was a time of peace, prosperity, and cultural flowering that shone brightly after the darkness that had come before. The arts flourished, literature was written and copied, and the old Sumerian language and traditions were carefully preserved and honored. Trade brought wealth from distant lands, and the cities grew rich and comfortable once more. It was a time when the achievements of earlier ages were gathered, organized, and built upon, a kind of high summer of the old Sumerian civilization. Yet like all golden ages, it too would come to an end, for no age of glory lasts forever in the restless story of Mesopotamia. But before we follow the story onward, we must pause on one of the most important legacies of this age, one that would shape human society far into the future. For it was in this era that we find some of the oldest written laws in the world. Among the many things that the kings of this age gave to the world, few are more important than the idea of written law. In a society as complex as theirs, with so many people living close together, buying and selling, borrowing and lending, marrying and quarreling, there had to be some way to settle disputes fairly. For a long time, justice had rested on custom and on the word of the king or the local leaders, who judged each case as it came. But there was a problem with this, because a ruling based only on custom or on one person's judgment could easily be unfair, changing from place to place and from judge to judge. Written law offered something better, a set of rules that were fixed, public, and the same for everyone, at least in principle. This was a powerful and lasting idea. The oldest known written law code that has survived comes from this very age, from a king of named Ur-Nammu, who ruled at the start of the Golden Age. His code is much older than the more famous laws that would come later, and it gives us a precious glimpse into how these ancient people thought about justice. The code begins with the king describing how he brought order and fairness to the land, protecting the weak from the strong, and making sure that the poor were not cheated by the rich. This was the ideal that the good king was supposed to uphold, to be a shepherd who cared for his flock and defended those who could not defend themselves. Justice was seen as a sacred duty of kingship, a gift the ruler owed to his people and to the gods. The laws themselves were written in a simple form that would be used for centuries afterward. Each law described a situation and then stated what the consequence should be, in the form of, if this happens, then this shall be the result. For example, a law might say that if a person did a certain wrong, then they had to pay a certain amount to make it right. Many of the laws in Ur-Nammu's code dealt with harm done to others and set out payments that the guilty person owed to the the one they had wronged. This system of paying to make amends was an important step because it offered a peaceful and orderly way to settle wrongs, rather than leaving people to take revenge on one another. It was an attempt to replace endless cycles of anger and retaliation with a fair and predictable process. These early laws show us a great deal about the society that made them. They reveal a world with different classes of people, where the punishment or payment could depend on who you were and who you had wronged. They show a society deeply concerned with property, with fields and animals and goods, and with making sure these were protected. They show that family matters like marriage and inheritance were important enough to be written into law. And above all, they show a people who believed that society should be governed by rules, not just by the whim of the powerful. This belief that there should be a known and shared standard of justice is one of the great foundations of human civilization, and it was being laid down here in the clay of Mesopotamia thousands of years ago. The idea of written law did not appear all at once in its final form. It grew and developed over time, as different kings issued their own codes, each building on what had come before. The code of Ur-Nammu was followed by others in the centuries that came after, as the tradition of written law took deeper root in the land. Each new code reflected the concerns of its own time, but all shared the same basic aim: to bring order, fairness, and predictability to human affairs. This slow building up of legal tradition was one of Mesopotamia's greatest gifts to the world, for the idea that laws should be written down and applied to all is one that we still hold dear today. And this tradition would reach its most famous height in the hands of a king who came later, a king whose name has never been forgotten. That king was Hammurabi of Babylon. The golden age of Ur, for all its glory, eventually came to an end, worn down by famine, invasion, and the endless pressures that no state could resist forever. Once again, the land broke apart into rival kingdoms, and once again, the cities struggled and competed for power. Out of this shifting landscape, a new city slowly rose to greatness, one that had been small and unimportant in earlier ages, but was now growing in strength. This city was Babylon, sitting on the Euphrates in the heart of the land, and it would become one of the most famous cities in all of history. Its rise to greatness came under a single remarkable king, a ruler whose name would echo down through the ages as one of the great lawgivers of the ancient world. His name was Hammurabi. Hammurabi came to the throne of Babylon as the ruler of a fairly small kingdom, surrounded by rivals who were just as strong or stronger than he was. He was patient and clever, and he spent the early years of his reign carefully building up his city's strength, improving its walls, its temples, and its canals. He watched the other kingdoms closely, waiting for the right moment to act, forming alliances when they served him and breaking them when they no longer did. When the time was right, he moved with skill and determination, defeating his rivals one by one through a mix of warfare and cunning diplomacy. Over the course of his long reign, he brought city after city under his control, until at last he had united much of the land under the rule of Babylon. From a modest beginning, he had built a great kingdom. But Hammurabi is remembered today not mainly for his conquests, which faded soon after his death, but for something far more lasting. He is remembered for his laws. Late in his reign, Hammurabi gathered together a great collection of laws, nearly 300 of them, covering a huge range of matters in the life of his people. And he did something remarkable with them. He had them carved onto a tall pillar of hard black stone, a monument that could be set up in public for all to see. At the top of this stone was carved an image of Hammurabi, standing before the God of justice, receiving the authority to rule and to judge. Below this image, column after column of cuneiform writing set out the laws in careful detail. This stone has survived to our own day, and it is one of the most precious treasures we have from the ancient world. The laws carved on Hammurabi's stone open a wide window onto the daily life of his people, showing us their concerns, their fears, and their sense of right and wrong. They deal with an enormous range of matters, from trade and business to marriage and family, from farming and property to crime and punishment. They set prices and wages. They lay out the duties of workers and the responsibilities of builders, and they describe how disputes should be settled. Reading them, we can almost see the busy life of the ancient city, the merchants and farmers, the husbands and wives, the builders and doctors, all going about their lives under the watchful eye of the law. The laws show a society that valued order and fairness, and that tried to bring the messy affairs of human life under a clear set of rules. Some of Hammurabi's laws are famous for their harshness, following the principle that a wrongdoer should suffer the same harm they had caused, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. This idea that the punishment should match the crime was meant to bring a kind of balance and fairness, limiting revenge to something equal rather than allowing endless escalation. But the laws were not equal for everyone, for the punishment often depended on the class of the people involved. A crime against a person of high standing was punished more harshly than the same crime against a person of low standing, and the wealthy could sometimes pay to escape punishments that fell heavily on the poor. This tells us that Mesopotamian society was divided into ranks, with different rules for different kinds of people. It was not equal as we would understand equality today, but it was still a system of law that applied to all. The importance of Hammurabi's code lies not only in the laws themselves, but in the powerful idea behind it. By carving his laws in stone and setting them up in public, Hammurabi declared that the law was above any single person, that it was fixed and known and applied to the whole society. He presented himself as a king who ruled justly, who protected the weak from the strong, and who brought order and fairness to his people. Whether he always lived up to this ideal we cannot know, but the ideal itself was a mighty one, and it has echoed through all the ages since. The idea that a society should be governed by written laws, publicly known and applied to all, is one of the great foundations of civilization, and Hammurabi's stone stands as one of its earliest and grandest monuments. His name lives on long after his kingdom turned to dust, because of the enduring power of that idea. And the city he made great, Babylon, would go on to a glory even beyond his reign. The city of Babylon, which Hammurabi had raised to greatness, went on to become one of the most famous cities in all of human history, a name that still carries a sense of wonder and legend today. Over the centuries, through many rises and falls, Babylon grew into a vast and splendid metropolis, the largest and richest city of its age. It sat astride the Euphrates, and its wealth and beauty drew visitors and traders from across the known world. To approach Babylon in its glory was to see something breathtaking, a city of towering walls, grand temples, and shining gates rising out of the plain. It became a symbol of human achievement and human pride, a place spoken of with awe in stories and records that have come down to us across the ages. Even now, thousands of years later, the name Babylon still stirs the imagination. The walls of Babylon were among the wonders of the ancient world, so thick and so high that they were said to be almost impossible to breach. They stretched for miles around the city, protecting the crowded streets and grand buildings within. The most famous of the city's gates was a magnificent entrance covered in bricks glazed a deep and brilliant blue, decorated with images of animals real and mythical, formed in raised patterns and colored in gold and other bright hues. Passing through this gate, a visitor entered a broad processional way, a grand street used for religious festivals, lined with more of the beautiful glazed brick decorations. The whole effect must have been dazzling, a display of wealth and artistry meant to impress everyone who saw it. Babylon was a city built to inspire awe, and it succeeded. At the heart of the city rose a great ziggurat, an enormous step tower dedicated to the chief god of Babylon, so tall and so famous that it became legendary. Some believe it was the inspiration for the ancient story of a great tower built to reach the heavens. Beside it stood the main temple of the city's god, the center of Babylon's religious life, where the greatest festivals were held. The city was also said to hold a wonder of a different kind, a series of lush gardens rising in terraces, green and blooming in the middle of the dry plain, watered by clever means and planted with trees and flowers from many lands. Whether these famous gardens existed exactly as the old stories describe, they became one of the celebrated wonders of the ancient world, a symbol of Babylon's wealth and its power to create beauty even in a harsh land. But Babylon was far more than a place of grand buildings and beautiful gates. It was also a great center of learning and knowledge, where scholars and scribes carried on the long traditions of Mesopotamian wisdom and pushed them to new heights. The Babylonians were especially skilled in the study of the stars, watching the night sky with great care and keeping detailed records of the movements of the moon, the planets, and the stars over many years. From these careful observations, they learned to predict the changing of the seasons and the return of the heavenly bodies, laying the foundations of the science of astronomy. They were also gifted in mathematics, developing clever ways of counting and calculating that we still feel the effects of today. Their way of dividing things into 60 parts is why we still count 60 minutes in an hour and 60 seconds in a minute. Life in Babylon buzzed with activity, for it was a great crossroads of trade where goods and people from many lands came together. In its markets, one could find products carried from faraway places, precious metals and stones, fine cloth, spices, timber, and all manner of goods brought by traders who traveled long and dangerous roads. The streets were crowded and busy, full of the sounds of many languages and the sights of people from distant lands, all drawn to the wealth and opportunity of the great city. Craftsmen worked at their trades, scribes kept the records of countless deals, and priests carried out the endless duties of the temples. Babylon was a living, breathing center of the ancient world, a place where wealth, knowledge, and human energy came together in one dazzling city. It seemed to stand at the very center of everything. Yet even Babylon, for all its glory and fame, could not escape the restless tides of history that swept across the land. The story of Mesopotamia was never one of a single unbroken power, but of many peoples and cities rising and falling in turn, each having its day and then giving way to the next. Even as Babylon shone, other powers were rising in the region, powers that would one day overshadow and even conquer the great city. To the north, a fierce and warlike people had been growing in strength for a long time, building an empire founded on military might and iron discipline. In time, they would become the terror of the ancient world, sweeping across the land with their powerful armies. These were the Assyrians, and their rise would open a new and mighty chapter in the long story of the land between the rivers. Far to the north of Babylon, Along the upper reaches of the Tigris lay the homeland of the Assyrians, a people who would build one of the mightiest empires the ancient world had ever seen. The Assyrians shared much of the culture and religion of the rest of Mesopotamia, but their land was harder and more exposed, surrounded by enemies on many sides. Perhaps this difficult position made them tough and warlike, for they became famous above all for their skill and ferocity in battle. Over many centuries, the Assyrians rose and fell in power more than once, but in their greatest age they forged an empire that stretched across a vast region, far larger than anything that had come before. They ruled through a combination of military strength, careful organization, and a reputation for terror that made their enemies tremble. The Assyrian army was the most powerful fighting force of its time, and it was the foundation on which the whole empire rested. The Assyrians were pioneers in the art of war, developing new weapons, tactics, and tools that gave them a great advantage over their enemies. They made wide use of iron for their weapons and armor, which was stronger than the metals used before. They built powerful war machines to break down the walls of enemy cities, and they were experts in the art of the siege, surrounding a city completely to cut off all food and supplies until it fell. Their armies were well organized and disciplined, with foot soldiers, cavalry, and archers all working together. When the Assyrian army marched, few could stand against it, and city after city fell before its might. The Assyrians were also known and feared for their harsh treatment of those who resisted them. They deliberately cultivated a reputation for cruelty as a tool of war, believing that if their enemies were terrified enough, many would surrender without a fight. They carved images and wrote accounts boasting of the terrible things they did to cities that dared to rebel, meaning to strike fear into the hearts of all who might think of opposing them. One of their most effective and far-reaching policies was to move conquered peoples away from their homelands, resettling them in distant parts of the empire. This scattered and mixed the different peoples, making it harder for any of them to unite in rebellion. It was a harsh and painful practice that uprooted countless people from their homes, and it reshaped the population of the whole region. This part of the story is one that must be told honestly, even in a quiet telling like this one. Yet there was far more to the Assyrians than war and terror, for they were also great builders and keepers of knowledge. Their kings raised magnificent palaces in their capital cities, vast complexes decorated with beautiful carved stone panels showing scenes of war, hunting, and royal life. These carvings were done with remarkable skill and detail, and many of them survive today, giving us a vivid picture of the Assyrian world. Great winged bulls with human heads guarded the gates of their palaces, enormous stone figures meant to protect against evil. The Assyrians built roads, canals, and aqueducts, and they organized their empire with great care, using a network of officials and messengers to keep control over their far-flung lands. They were as skilled in building and governing as they were in war. Perhaps the greatest gift the Assyrians left to the world was a library, gathered by one of their last great kings, a ruler who loved learning as much as he loved conquest. This king sent scribes across his empire to collect and copy the writings of the past, gathering thousands upon thousands of clay tablets into a single great collection. The library held the accumulated knowledge of Mesopotamian civilization, stories, prayers, laws, records, and the wisdom of ages. Among its treasures was a copy of the ancient epic of Gilgamesh, which might otherwise have been lost forever. When the library was buried in the ruins of the fallen city, the baked clay tablets survived beneath the earth, waiting to be found thousands of years later. Because of this one king's love of knowledge, we can read the words and stories of an ancient world that would otherwise have vanished completely. It is one of the great gifts of history. But the Assyrian Empire, built so heavily on fear and force, made many enemies, and in the end, those enemies rose up together against it. The very harshness that had held the empire together also filled it with resentment, and when the empire showed signs of weakness, its subject peoples and its neighbors seized the chance to strike. A great alliance of enemies came together and attacked the mighty Assyrian cities, and one by one the great capitals fell in fire and destruction. The collapse was swift and complete, and the proud empire that had terrified the world was wiped away. Its great cities were left in ruins, buried and forgotten for centuries. The fall of Assyria left a great gap in the region, and into that gap stepped Babylon once more, rising again to a final age of glory before the long story of independent Mesopotamia drew toward its close. With the fall of Assyria, the ancient city of Babylon rose to greatness one last time, entering a final golden age that would be remembered as one of its most glorious. Under a new line of powerful kings, Babylon rebuilt itself into the grandest city of its age, restoring its temples, its walls, and its wonders to even greater splendor than before. The most famous of these kings ruled for many years and led Babylon to the height of its power and beauty, conquering wide lands and bringing great wealth home to adorn his city. It was during this final age that Babylon gained much of its lasting fame, with its magnificent blue gate, its towering temple, and its legendary gardens. This was the Babylon that lived on in memory and legend long after its stones had crumbled, the great city at its most dazzling. This last age of Babylon was a time not only of grand building, but of remarkable learning, especially in the study of the heavens. The Babylonian astronomers of this period reached heights of skill that would not be matched for a very long time. They kept careful records of the movements of the stars and planets night after night, year after year, building up a store of observations that let them predict the movements of the heavens with real accuracy. They could foretell eclipses of the moon and the sun, and they tracked the wandering planets across the sky with great precision. This patient watching of the heavens was tied to their religion, for they believed the stars held messages about the future. But in the process they laid down real scientific knowledge that would be passed on to later peoples and would help shape the science of the ages to come. Yet even at the height of this final glory, the days of independent Mesopotamia were drawing to a close. Far to the east, a new power had risen, the Persians, who were building an empire even greater than any that had come before. The Persian Empire grew with astonishing speed, swallowing up kingdom after kingdom until it dominated the whole region. In time, the Persian armies turned toward Babylon, and the great city, for all its walls and wealth, could not hold out against them. Babylon fell to the Persians, and with its fall, the long age of Mesopotamian rulers ruling their own land came to an end. The land that had given birth to the first cities, the first writing, and the first laws now became just one province among many in a vast foreign empire. The great story was entering its final chapter. Under the Persians and the empires that followed them, the old cities of Mesopotamia slowly declined. They did not vanish all at once, for many remained lived in and important for a long time yet. But the center of power had shifted away, and the ancient ways gradually faded. New rulers, new languages, and new customs washed over the land in wave after wave through the centuries that followed. The old gods were slowly forgotten, their temples left to crumble. The ancient art of cuneiform writing, which had recorded the life of the land for thousands of years, was used by fewer and fewer people until at last the knowledge of how to read it died out entirely. The long thread of Mesopotamian civilization, stretching back to the first ditch dug in the mud, was finally coming to its end after an astonishing run of thousands of years. The great cities that had once blazed with life fell quiet and empty over the long centuries. As the rivers shifted their courses and the channels filled with silt, the fields that had fed the cities dried up and the people drifted away. The mud brick buildings, no longer cared for, slowly melted back into the earth from which they had been made, dissolving in the rare rains and crumbling in the wind. Wind-blown dust and sand gathered over the ruins, layer upon layer, year after year, until the great temples and palaces were buried beneath low mounds. In time, even the memory of what these mounds contained was lost. Where mighty cities had once stood, there was now only silence and empty land, with nothing to show the traveler that here, long ago, human civilization had first been born. The land had returned to the quiet emptiness from which it had risen. And so, for a very long time, the great achievements of Mesopotamia lay hidden and forgotten beneath the sand. The names of its kings, the words of its scribes, the stories of its heroes, all seemed lost to the world forever. The mounds that covered the buried cities were passed by countless travelers who had no idea what lay beneath their feet. The first great chapter of human civilization had closed, and it seemed as though it had closed for good, its wonders sealed away under the earth. But the story was not truly over. Buried in the dry ground, the clay tablets and stone monuments waited, patient and enduring, holding the memory of a lost world. And thousands of years later, curious minds would begin to dig into those silent mounds, and the forgotten world of Mesopotamia would slowly, wonderfully, come back into the light. For more than 2,000 years, the cities of Mesopotamia lay buried and forgotten, their story lost to all but a few faint echoes in old writings. Then, a few centuries ago, curious travelers and scholars began to take notice of the strange mounds that dotted the landscape of the region. They wondered what these low hills might contain, and some began to dig into them to find out. What they uncovered astonished the world. Beneath the earth they found the remains of ancient cities, the crumbled walls of palaces and temples, great carved stone figures, and above all, countless clay tablets covered in the mysterious wedge-shaped writing. A lost world was rising once more from the sand, revealing the traces of a civilization far older than almost anyone had imagined. The buried past was beginning to speak again. But finding the tablets was only the beginning, for at first no one alive could read a single word of the strange wedge marks that covered them. The knowledge of cuneiform had died out completely thousands of years before, and the tablets were silent, holding their secrets locked away. Cracking this code became one of the great puzzles of scholarship, a challenge that drew brilliant minds from many lands. Slowly, patiently, working over many years, scholars began to unravel the mystery. They found helpful clues in monuments that carried the same message written in more than one script, allowing them to compare the unknown writing with languages they could read. Sign by sign, word by word, they slowly worked out the meanings of the wedges, until at last the ancient writing gave up its secrets. The moment cuneiform could be read again was a turning point in our understanding of the human past. Suddenly, the silent tablets could speak, pouring out the words of people who had lived thousands of years ago. Scholars could now read the records of kings, the accounts of merchants, the letters of ordinary people, the prayers of priests, and the stories that had entertained and moved the ancient world. One of the most stunning discoveries came when a scholar, reading through the tablets from the great buried library, came upon a story that told of a great flood, of a man who built a boat and saved life from the rising waters. This was part of the Epic of Gilgamesh, a story of astonishing age and power that had been lost for millennia and was now read again for the first time. The discovery caused a sensation and showed just how much treasure lay waiting in the tablets. As more and more of the tablets were read and more of the cities were uncovered, a whole lost civilization came back into view in remarkable detail. We learned the names of the great cities, Ur and Uruk, Babylon and Akkad, and the names of their kings and gods. We learned how the people farmed, traded, worshipped, and governed themselves. We came to understand the great inventions that had first appeared here, the writing, the laws, the cities, and so much more. Piece by piece, scholars rebuilt the story of a civilization that had shaped the very foundations of the human world and then been utterly forgotten. It was as if a whole chapter of humanity's story, torn out and lost, had been carefully found and put back into the book. The people of Mesopotamia, silent for so long, could be heard once more. The rediscovery of Mesopotamia changed how we understand our own history in a profound way. Before these discoveries, many people believed that civilization had begun in other, better-known ancient lands, and the very existence of this older world had faded from common memory. Now it became clear that here, in the land between the two rivers, lay the roots of so much that we take for granted. This was where humans first gathered in great cities, first learned to write, first set down laws, and first built the kind of organized society that would spread across the world. The people of Mesopotamia turned out to be not some minor forgotten folk, but the pioneers of civilization itself, the ones who took the first great steps down a road that all of humanity would follow. Bringing them back to memory restored a missing piece of who we are. Today, the work of uncovering and understanding Mesopotamia continues, though it has often been made difficult by the troubles and conflicts of the modern region. Museums around the world hold treasures from these ancient cities, the carved stones, the beautiful gates, and the humble clay tablets that carry the words of the past. Scholars still work to read tablets that have never been translated, and each one may hold some new piece of the story. The lost world that lay buried for so long has been given back to us, and through it we can reach across an unimaginable span of time to touch the lives of our distant ancestors. And when we look closely at that ancient world, we find something remarkable, that it is not so distant after all. For the gifts of Mesopotamia still flow through our own lives every single day. It is one of the most wonderful truths of history that the civilization born in the mud of Mesopotamia thousands of years ago still shapes our world in countless ways, even if we rarely stop to notice it. Think of writing, the very thing you use to read these words and to record your own thoughts. That great gift was born here, in the storehouses of these ancient cities, when people first pressed marks into clay to keep track of their grain. Every book, every letter, every written word in the world today can trace its ancestry back to those humble beginnings in the land between the rivers. The people who invented writing could never have imagined where their idea would lead, yet the whole vast world of written knowledge grew from the seed they planted. Every time we write or read, we are using their gift. Think too of the cities we live in, the great gatherings of people that cover so much of our modern world. The very idea of the city, of thousands or millions of people living together in one place, working at many different trades and depending on one another, first took shape here in Mesopotamia. When these ancient people first crowded together in Uruk and Ur, They were inventing a way of life that would eventually spread across the whole earth. The challenges they faced of how to share water and food, how to settle disputes, how to organize so many lives together, are the same challenges that cities everywhere still work to solve. Every time we walk down a busy street, surrounded by strangers all living their lives side by side, we are living in a world that Mesopotamia first imagined into being. Think of the laws that govern our societies, the shared rules that keep order and protect the weak from the strong. The idea that a society should be run by written laws, known to all and applied to everyone, was first carved into clay and stone in these ancient lands. When we speak of justice, of fair treatment, of rules that stand above the whim of any single ruler, we are echoing ideas that Uruk and Hammurabi set down thousands of years ago. Their laws were not perfect, and their world was not equal as we would wish, but the great idea they gave us, that law should be written, public, and binding on all, is one of the pillars on which our own societies still stand. Every courtroom and every law book carries a distant echo of those ancient codes. And there is more, so much more, woven quietly into our daily lives. When you look at a clock and see 60 minutes in an hour, or 60 seconds in a minute, you are using a way of counting that came from these ancient people, who divided things into 60 parts long ago. When you see a circle divided into 360 degrees, that too traces back to their mathematics. The wheel, which turns beneath every car and machine, came into wide use here in this land. The way we watch the stars and understand the movements of the heavens grew from the patient nightly observations of the Babylonian astronomers. Even some of our oldest stories, tales of great floods and heroic journeys, carry echoes of the myths first told in these river cities. The fingerprints of Mesopotamia are pressed all over our modern world. When we remember all of this, the ancient land between the two rivers no longer seems so distant or so strange. Those people who lived and worked and dreamed so many thousands of years ago were not so different from us after all. They loved and feared. They built and created. They sought order and meaning. They wondered at the stars and grieved for those they lost. They faced hard lives with courage and cleverness. And out of the mud and the floods they built the very foundations of the world we live in today. When we honor them, we honor the beginning of our own long human story, the first great steps taken on the road that led all the way to us. Their story is, in a very real sense, our story too, the opening chapter of the long book of civilization. And so we come to the end of our long journey through the land between the rivers, from the first ditch dug in the mud to the great cities and empires that rose and fell across the ages. We have followed the whole arc of a civilization that gave the world writing, cities, laws, and so much more. A civilization that shone brightly, faded into darkness, and was found again after thousands of years of silence. Now let the mind rest on one last quiet image. Picture the two great rivers as they were at the very beginning, and as they still are today, flowing slowly across the wide and open plain under a soft evening sky. The cities that once rose along their banks have long since returned to the earth, and the land is quiet now, the way it was before it all began. But the rivers still flow, patient and enduring, carrying their waters down toward the sea, just as they have for countless ages. The same rivers that once cradled the birth of civilization. The water moves gently in the fading light, and the plain grows still, and the long day of history settles softly into rest. Thank you for spending this quiet time here, and for letting these ancient stories keep you company. Rest well now, and let the slow rivers carry you gently off to sleep.